Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the EventBuzz podcast presented by Purple Pass. I'm Savannah, your host for the show and part of the Purple Pass team. Today's guest is Tiffany Allen, founder of AEA Consulting Firm, a full-service corporate event management company. Drawing from her 15 years of public sector experience, where she was a contract manager, Tiffany leverages this expertise to help businesses and agencies create memorable events. On this episode, we will be discussing vendor and contract management when it comes to event planning, as well as tips for securing speakers and forming partnerships. Hi, Tiffany. Thanks for coming on to the show. We're so excited to have you. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Thank you for having me.
I let the listeners know in the beginning a little bit about you and your company, but if you don't mind, just starting this off with introducing yourself and just maybe a little bit about your background and how you got started in the world of events.
Sure. So my name is Tiffany Allen. So personally, I'm a mother of 3 kids, owner of AEA Consulting Firm. And fun fact, AEA is my children's initials, Anaya, Ethan, and Adriana. So it's an easy name for the company.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I got into event planning because I was pretty dissatisfied with my 9 to 5. It just didn't allow for any creativity. And in my 9 to 5 was in contracts. But as part of that role, I would sometimes, plan conferences for my job, and they were pretty large conferences. People from all over the country would attend, and I liked the work. And so I said, well, let me just try to see if I can do this. And so my first couple of clients were friends who one had a nonprofit, one was a business owner. So I started small with them just to kind of build up my past performance. And I have been rolling ever since then. And I started in 2016.
Wow. Good for you. I love that. We're seeing that more and more every day. I feel like people are just over 9 to 5 and doing something else finally to make them, more fulfilled.
Exactly.
So, I love that. And okay, so everyone answers this question differently. So I want to ask you, for when you're working with event planners or planning an event, where do you start? So what do you start strategizing or planning first?
Okay, so I don't do social events. Most of my clients are government agencies or corporations and nonprofits. So when you ask about strategizing, my strategy is part of the proposal that I submit.
Okay, gotcha.
And so when I submit the proposal, and I learned this from another event planner, like she told me, hey, your proposal has your whole work plan in it. You're giving them too much information because if you lose, they'll just take your proposal and they can do it themselves or have another company do what you said you were going to do.
Yeah.
So I started when I submit my proposals to whoever I'm submitting it to, I have kind of a high level plan of how I'll get the work done, right? So when you're submitting a government proposal, they issue an RFP, or request for proposals. So they already have it listed out what they want done. And so pretty much to answer your question, my strategy is part of my proposal process, but it's a high-level strategy. And so if I get awarded the contract with the government, or if the private industry chooses me to do their event, then I can plug in the more detailed parts, right? So, for instance, I had a contract with a city organization to acquire sponsors for them, and so I wrote the proposal high level of how I would get the sponsors, who I could possibly, what kind of companies I would reach out to. But once I got the contract, I then said, okay, I'm going to reach out to these specific companies, right? So you give the high level first, and once I get the award, then I'll give the more detailed information. And then from there, I start the timeline. And after I pretty much do the timeline after our kickoff meeting, right? Because another thing that I've learned through the years, people who are writing the proposals, it's no fault of their own, but they don't know what they don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at that initial kickoff meeting, more things can come out and more things are extracted. And then you can build even a better, stronger strategy. And then you can form your timeline after that.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And so when you say, I know part of your job is reaching out to sponsors, reaching out to speakers or who you need to reach out to. It's a good question because a lot of people don't know how to approach this or how to even go about, reaching out to these people or where to start. So do you have any suggestions when it comes to, forming those type of partnerships?
Sure. And so for sponsors, the best approach that has worked for me is LinkedIn. And to be honest, when I first started, I couldn't believe the response I received. Just from doing research on the company. Let's say I wanted to use Johnson and Johnson for instance. Okay, you see, who on LinkedIn works for Johnson and Johnson, and it does definitely take some research, but I've had the best luck with LinkedIn for sponsorship acquisition.
Yeah, that's so simple, like a really simple platform. You just wouldn't think like that's where you should go for your sponsors, but it makes sense because it's a networking platform.
Exactly. And then too, another thing that helps a lot, and not just with sponsors, but with securing speakers, is I have a pretty large network. So I feel like anybody in my network can get a hold of somebody who can get a hold of somebody. It's one of those things like, someone who knows someone who knows someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not paying out to be a speaker or a sponsor per se, but they can give recommendations. But just through my network, I was able to acquire a large amount of sponsors for a contract I had, with the local city here. And also another good old fashioned thing is cold calling. And so I've learned too that if you have an event planning contract for an established event, it's almost simple to get sponsors. It's harder to get sponsors for a new unknown event. That's 100%. That's one thing I do know. If it's something that's new or it's only been in existence for 2 years, it's harder to get sponsors. But if it's a well-established event and people around town know it, the sponsors literally kind of pour in.
Yeah. So for those newer ones, do you have any advice for them when it comes to, obviously it's going to be a lot more challenging to get people to believe in your event and want to be a part of it. But, I guess that comes with how you approach them.
And so to be honest, so with the new event, when I planned about, pre-pandemic, it was right before the pandemic hit. My best approach was, or my best results, I should say, was going out, reaching out to friends of friends or colleagues of colleagues, and some cold calling. And what helped was having a well-known keynote speaker as well. And also having the agenda, even if it's a draft agenda, just so they know, okay, this is what I'm giving my money for. Oh, this is the caliber of speakers who will be at this event. This is a good investment for my company.
Yeah.
Because if you know your agenda, even if it's a draft, and try to stick with, don't totally do a 180 on your agenda. But if they can see who you're having, and they'll know, okay, this is their target audience. This is a good target audience for my company to reach out to, or this is a good target audience for my logo to be on their website or on their program, or for us to even have a table there, a vending table, depending on the type of conference that you're having.
Yeah. And so like you're saying logos and tables and stuff like that, I'm assuming that's part of like a package,
Exactly.
sponsor package. Do you create those? Do you put together the sponsorship packages that kind of convince people to come aboard?
Yes. And so I work with the client, and, I give them a proposed list of who I plan to reach out to. And before I send out the sponsorship deck or the packet, I will send it to my client to make sure that they're okay with it. And yeah, so the best option too is to have 3 to 4 different levels, right? So one event I did, it was a huge event, the one I was referring to with the city contract.
Yeah.
It was maybe 25 to 30,000 people in attendance. But there was a main performing stage with the jumbotrons on both sides of the stage, right? So one of my sponsors was Coca-Cola. So their name was listed on the jumbotron. But if someone donated, I mean, we took any, dollar amount of donations, but if someone donated $500, they wouldn't get on the jumbotron, but they would get some other little, maybe they would get prime location as a vendor, right? I'm making up that dollar amount, 500. That's not a lot, but if it was a small amount of money, obviously you would get less advertising at the festival. But our larger vendors, our larger sponsors, their logos were on the back of the t-shirts. They were listed on the jumbotron, right? And we even gave them representatives from their companies tickets to the mayor's tent at the event, right? So depending on
Yeah.
your dollar amount, you can incentivize your goodies that you're going to give to the people, and they absolutely loved it. Absolutely. I mean, a ticket to the mayor's tent in a summertime festival is a huge deal. I mean, you wouldn't believe how huge that is. So, to me, that's been the best approach.
And do you think when it comes to sponsors, would you say like there's a certain amount, or would you say more the merrier?
I would say, honestly, the more the merrier.
Yeah.
Now, however, you don't you have to have know that sweet spot of the cutoff, right? Because you don't want your program to have 100 different logos in it, because
Yeah.
nobody's going to stand out, right? So to
Yeah.
have your logo in the program or your name on the jumbotron, like if I gave $500, I wouldn't. I'm sorry, if I gave $10,000, I wouldn't want my name on the jumbotron with someone who gave $500, right?
Yeah.
So to have those the exclusive advertising rights, you kind of have to go with the higher amount of money. So yeah, the more the merrier, but it is a sweet spot. You have to cut it off at some point because you don't want to have this whole crowd going.
Yeah, exactly. That makes sense.
Where nobody's getting recognized as an
Yeah.
exclusive sponsor, right?
Yeah. Or you're like flipping through 5 pages of logos.
Exactly. No company who donated money wants to be in that situation. So I kind of
Yeah.
have to put myself in the mind of a donor. Like if I'm a donor, what would I want? Would I want my logo listed next to 50 other logos? And I would not.
Yeah, exactly. That makes sense. And then I wanted to ask, because I know previously you were a contract manager. Do you still have are you in control of the contracts or putting them together when you're doing all these partnerships as well?
Definitely.
Because
Yes.
I want to
So
pick your brain about that, because that's for some reason, like contracts, it's a scary thing. You want to make sure you're covering all your bases, doing everything right. So I just want to see if you have any like suggestions when it comes to like putting together that contract and, making sure everything's good to go.
so first of all, number one thing when you're putting together a contract, if you're promising somebody something, make sure that you can deliver, right? So double check with your client
Yeah.
to make sure, okay, I can deliver what I told this sponsor that I'm going to give them. And I'm assuming you're right now we're referring to sponsorship contracts, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Since we're on
Yeah,
the roll with
yeah,
that.
yeah. So yeah. So make sure, number one, that you can deliver what you promised. You said that you would deliver. Um, and number two, it doesn't have to be super long. 2 to 3 pages. Go over the contract with the sponsor as well. And when I say go over it, I mean just have a quick little meeting where you literally read through it line by line, sentence by sentence. And I learned this from my on the job from my former career where we would award contracts, and it was very painstaking. I mean, it was painful. We awarded a contract to a large contractor, and our contracting officer, we had a kickoff meeting with them.
Mm-hmm.
He literally read a 50-page contract. I mean, read it out loud. And it was very painful to sit through, but it was very necessary. I've learned that it's very, very necessary. So both parties understand. And then you can do this before it's signed, both parties understand this is my expectation. This is your expectation.
Yeah.
And so I don't, and obviously too, have a lawyer look over a contract, just to make sure. And I have two lawyers on hand, that I use, but I should say that I used, because once you have one, you have your template, you can kind of use it over and over again.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I would definitely, if you're not a lawyer, which I mean, most event planners are not going to be a lawyer, have a lawyer review it and just use that template. And then you can just interchange it and then change the specifics depending obviously on your client, the date of the event, and the expectations.
Yeah. And would you recommend like researching too because I feel like there's some things, if you're new to like, putting together a contract and stuff, there's some little things and statements you might miss just because you don't think about it that you want to have in that contract.
Yeah, definitely. I haven't used LegalZoom, but I know people have pretty good luck with LegalZoom. Just use, as a template. But I've just I've had my lawyer draft it for me just because this is what they do. And it's, a lawyer friend, again, reaching out to my network. And she said, okay, this is what you're going to use to protect yourself legally and this protects them, as the sponsor. So I've kind of been lucky in that.
That makes sense. I know a few people that have used LegalZoom before and they like it, and it's supposed to be really easy, straightforward process to use. So I didn't even think about that, but that's a good idea. Because I don't know. Contracts are intimidating because you really don't want to miss anything out. So I can see like, that's why people have, like 50 pages because they're like, and in case this happened and this and this. And so it definitely makes sense.
And also, I mean, while we're on the subject of contracts, and this is one thing I've learned through the years, because remember when I mentioned earlier, when somebody writes a RFP, they don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Have some kind of language or contingency for an amendment, right? Because you don't want to get stuck. We call it in government contracts, we call it scope creep, right? Where they wrote the scope for these 4 tasks, but once the work starts, they want you to complete 6 tasks, and those additional 2 tasks were not in the RFP, right? But they want you to complete the work for that same amount of money you agreed upon, and that has happened to me before, only once, but I vowed out that would never happen to me again. So I always make sure that I have some kind of amendment language in the contract that we in our final contract that we sign.
Okay, that's a good point. And I wanted to also jump back so we talked about sponsors, and I think we covered that pretty well. So I want to jump back really quick to, speakers or talent that you're bringing on. Is the approach for reaching out to them different? Would you say a little different than like reaching out to sponsors?
Yes, because so with the speakers, I normally have an introduction. Well, the sponsors do have an introductory email, but with the speakers, you want to give them more information on who will likely be attending this conference, right? Because you're going to have that information already before you reach out to them, because you want them to know the audience they're speaking to.
Mm-hmm.
And also, before you reach out to speakers, another thing that I found helpful is if you can find a little clip of them, maybe a YouTube video or something, because you want to make sure your speaker has a little bit of uh, I know some subjects are really hard because no two events are created equal, but you do want to have a speaker with a little bit of charisma. You don't want your audience to fall asleep, or if you do have, if it's a very, very tough, meaty subject matter, maybe put that in the morning, right after the plenary session or after breakfast,
Mm-hmm.
when people's minds are fresh. But going back to your question, when I reach out to speakers, I really have a more uh, in my email contains information of who will be there
Mm-hmm.
and why we are reaching out to them. And of course, and you want to put this, be very transparent if they will get paid or not, right? Like we would like you to speak in kind, or in turn, you can have a vendor table, or you know what I mean? Or you
Yeah.
can stay after for this networking session, for this VIP reception. So, you need to offer all of that free parking. If you're not paying your speakers, but if there's paid, you would reach out to them a little bit more differently, right? And it's you want whoever you have speak, you want them to show up, even if they are speaking complimentary. You still want them to show up, right? And so you kind of do have to throw in those incentives, like you will receive a speaker's gift. And another thing, and that's a huge thing, I love personalization. I mean, not to give a plug, but personalizationmall.com,
Okay.
those have the best little personalized gifts. Now, always get gifts, even if the speaker is paid or unpaid. Ordering gifts from there, it really does add a nice touch to say thank you for coming to this event.
Okay. Yeah, I love when people give plugs because we're doing this podcast also to help people. So I will go ahead and link that to the bottom for people that listen and might want to learn more about that. And I think what you said is extremely important regarding knowing your demographic. And it's part of like the timeline of planning. And I think people tend to overlook how important it is to know your demographic and who is going to be coming to your event first before anything else, or else it's like you're going to have this type of audience and invite this other type of speaker that doesn't either connect with them or isn't what they want. So it's really important, and that's a good tip.
And it's piggying back on knowing your demographic. So whoever is your demographic, you're going to find them in different places, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, we did a conference called the Business Growth Symposium with our target audience was small to mid-sized business owners, mostly government contractors.
Mm-hmm.
We reached out to well, not reached out, but used the list, the public list that has a list of contractors who are certified, right? Small, minority, disadvantaged business owners, women-owned businesses. All those lists are public. So we sent out mass emailers to them, right? So depending on who your target audience is, they will be in different places, right? So if you're doing a huge festival for 20 somethings, you're going to do heavily advertise on Instagram or probably now TikTok, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your target audience location is not created equal. And I think, and that's one of the hardest things, is trying to figure out, where am I going to find these people and how am I going to reach out to them?
Yeah.
But again, your B2B, your B2B conferences, you're going to have to try to get the email addresses or obviously advertise on LinkedIn. But your general public conferences, you're going to, depending on the demographic, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. So it's nothing is created equal, and also YouTube as well. So yeah, and then the large festival that I did in the city, they had bus advertisements and billboards, right? So, but they had a large budget for that.
Yeah.
And that goes too with what is the budget, right? So a government organization budget is going to be different than a nonprofit budget, So you have to be creative and work with the client to figure out, okay, this is how we're going to spend our money to get the word out to this target audience. And then also another thing to remember, if you're a nonprofit, a lot of local radio stations, you can get free ads. And I've learned that as well.
Oh, that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people forget about traditional marketing.
Yeah, like the public radio stations. I was able to set up an interview with the keynote speaker and a local public radio station, and it worked great. And it was free advertising, and it was maybe a 10 to 15-minute interview about the event.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're not just about the event, but asking him questions about his career, and then we were able to plug in the event. So yeah, do not forget radio, and go approach your local public radio stations.
Yeah, you can also do flyers, business like event cards at like local shops, and there's so much you can do. You just got to get super creative.
You have to get super creative and just know, okay, this is the best way to reach this audience, right? So a general public event, flyers may not, general public flyers would work, but if I'm trying to reach out to business owners,
no, it won't.
I have to figure out where they are. Where are they?
Exactly. Okay, well, this has been a great interview. And before I leave, Tiffany, I did want to ask if there's anything else you wanted to put out there for people listening, general tips when it comes to like forming partnerships, like we've talked about, sponsors, or anything else you feel like you wanted to add.
Oh, well, one thing I do want to add are tips for vendors. So I know that vending can be pricey, right? Costly.
Yeah.
Especially post-pandemic, in-person events were starting back up, and now they're kind of shutting back down, and we just don't know where we're going with the Delta variant. But hopefully in 2022, things will be on the up and up again.
Let's hope.
But yeah, for vendors, if you cannot afford a table, do not be afraid to negotiate, right? And if it's obviously if it's a well-known event, like say the Essence Festival, those vendor spots are probably going to sell out. But if it's a newer event or smaller event, you can try waiting until the last day to register as a vendor. Or if they may have spots available, you can say, hey, I'm a small business, I'm a locally owned business. Can you give me a break on the vending fee? Right? So don't be afraid to negotiate. And I would say more than just vendors, don't be afraid to negotiate, period. I figure the worst that someone can say is no. Like, no is not the end of the world. It's no, it is a complete sentence, but hey, if they say no, at least you tried. Like, just never be afraid to negotiate anything, because people come in with their price, and you have your price in mind, but you never know what'll happen if you just ask.
Yeah, you never know what they're thinking too, so they might be willing to go way lower than you thought.
Exactly. Okay. And also too, I want to add that for when you're creating your event website, it's obviously you're going to have the the details, as the date, the time, location, the point of contact. But it's also pretty nice to add your speakers' pictures to the website to make it more personable, and a little hyperlink to their bio to go along with their pictures. So those are pretty nice things to add to the more so a corporate event, a corporate events website, and the agenda, a draft agenda as well. So that'll help you with your advertising and possibly attracting more people.
Yeah, people definitely like to see like the schedules online because they like to know what to expect. That's a good point. At least for me.
Yeah, same for me as well. Yes.
I look for that. I'm like, okay, what's happening?
Yeah, and when is it happening, and most importantly, what time is lunch?
Yeah, exactly. Where's the snacks? Exactly. That's great points. Thank you so much. And thank you for taking your time out of your day to talk with me. I really appreciate it. And I know our listeners are really going to benefit from everything you had to say, because contracts and partnerships, those are scary. I don't know why. We have to face people. So those are a lot harder tasks to do.
Yes, they are.
Mm-hmm.
But what at the end, when it all pays off, it's well worth it at the end of the day, when you can look back and say this event was a success.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, thank you so much, and enjoy the weather there while we have it.
Yes.